Thank you so much, Andy, for coming on to our podcast and kind of, talking us through some of the things that, you may encounter when presenting your argument and some of the kind of arguments that you use for anti-campus carry. Uh, but go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me on. I am I'm Andy Pelosi. I'm the co-founder, executive director of the campaign to keep guns off campus. We were formed in 2008, a little bit after, less than a year after the Virginia Tech and then the Northern Illinois University shootings, Virginia Tech in 2007, obviously, and then Northern Illinois in February of 2008. And we were formed with the initial idea of trying to coordinate or develop a coalition of colleges and universities, public colleges and universities that would oppose changing state laws to allow people to carry concealed handguns on campus. And those kind of the people we mean are students, faculty, staff, non-law enforcement. We were concerned after those shootings that I mentioned that there would be a push by the gun lobby to to change laws and force the colleges to allow guns on campus, and that ended up from our point of view coming to fruition. So we've been battling this issue around the country since 2008. Fair amount of success, but definitely some losses in several states, which we could go into if you want to. But we've been doing this work, as I said, since 2008, and we're gearing up right now for the battles that we're anticipating in a couple different state legislatures in 2025.
Just out of curiosity, which state legislatures are you guys looking into right now?
Um, well, I think that really don't think we're going to tip our hand that much to our friends on the other side. But I would suspect that your state, Arizona, will introduce for the 35th year in a row. No, just kidding. For the at least the 14th year that I'm aware of, 14th or 15th year in a row, guns on campus. So I anticipate it being there. Definitely is going to be in Wyoming. Governor vetoed a bill that did a few things, including allow guns on campus. It was vetoed. The University of Wyoming Board of Trustees just this past Friday put forth a draft rule that would allow guns on campus in certain areas by certain people, but that was voted down, which was interesting, 6-5. But there, we know that, and they were doing that because the governor had directed them to take some action. But the legislature is going to come back with a bill to just tell the colleges you've got to allow guns on campus. I think Florida, is always in play, and it hasn't really come up much in the last few years. It was very a huge, hot issue in Florida. I would say starting around 2011 through around 2016, 17, then it calmed down. But I suspect we'll see it there again. I don't know where else. Could be places like Missouri, um, maybe Kentucky too. It's been brought up in Kentucky, and there could be there could be a couple other places like Louisiana and some other states.
Yeah, I know you guys have definitely had some wins in states like Georgia, Texas, more so for the private colleges in Texas, from what I understood. Um, and Florida. I know you guys did have some wins there. Um, what was the biggest argument when you were campaigning for this?
Mm.
What was the biggest argument that you had
Right.
against campus carry?
Right. Well, I think, Damien, that's I just want to back up a second. Let's talk quickly about Texas. In Texas, again, this type of policy change generally impacts public colleges. The privates generally can, assert their private property rights and so on. I'm not an attorney, but they do that. The only state where private colleges have been forced to allow guns on campuses is Wisconsin. and
Mhm.
but they've been able to limit both the publics and privates in Wisconsin have been able to limit where people can carry by posting signs and on building entrances and so on. So you're pretty limited there. In Texas, um, there was huge opposition in Texas to guns on campus starting around 2000, late 2008 into 2009, which was very successful in stopping that legislation until 2015. And then in 2015, um, the legislature passed it literally with about 20 minutes ago in the session, and that impacted the four-year schools. And then in 2016, it applied to the two-year schools. It doesn't apply to the private. So in Texas,
Mhm.
this was public. Um, in Florida, again, the same thing applying to public schools, the legislation, but it did not pass there.
Mhm.
Um, I would say some of the arguments that we found persuasive in opposition uh, really deal with risk posed by firearms to students, and the potential for an increased risk for firearm suicide. There is, suicide's the second leading cause of death for college age students. There's a number of there's a number of studies that that bear that out. Uh, one of our points was that if you introduce firearms into that equation, you're increasing risk. And therefore, if someone does have access to a firearm, they generally are going to be successful in committing the firearm suicide, you know, anywhere between 85 and 90% of the time. So that was one argument, increased risk. Um, there is also there's a historical argument that's, I think, gaining more traction, especially in light of a recent Supreme Court case, the Bruin case, where they want the justices want us to be looking at the history, and there's actually a history in some southern states and Midwestern states that either statutorily had prohibited firearms on college campuses, or there's also in policy. So for example, the University of Virginia has a policy going back, I think, until around the 1820s, uh, that their board of governors had passed that said that no firearms could be carried by students and others on the campus. So there is some history, and given the recent Supreme Court case, we've been trying to tease that out more and look at, okay, where were firearms prohibited, in the different states when it came to higher education. So there's that. Um, there's also, very little evidence to show that defensive gun uses on campus have been a deterrent. We've talked a bit about that issue, also. So those are some of the arguments that have been raised. And actually, the former governor of Georgia, Nathan Deal, in 2016, he vetoed guns on campus in 2016, and he pointed to the history as one example of being a reason that it didn't contradict the Second Amendment, for example, to prohibit weapons, because there was a history of that happening, especially in the state of Georgia.
Off of your history point with Bruin, I have a quote here from Thomas Jefferson in which he wrote in a veto statement where he said that no university or no student shall within the precincts of the university shall keep or use weapons or arms of any kind. So, do you think that the statements made by even the founders would matter more, or do you think that the laws set up by states themselves would make more sense in arguing for, at least from a history and tradition kind of standpoint? Which point do
Right.
you think is more important for the argument?
Um, I think that listen, if you've got someone like Jefferson saying this, and I think it was in the 1820s, I'm not positive when that was written.
It was
Uh,
written in 1824, so
okay.
right
All right.
on.
All right. So it's close. I think that that's pretty persuasive, especially since he's the author, of the Declaration, but he also was one of the people pushing the Bill of Rights, which, has Second Amendment, as you guys know. But and again, I'm not an attorney, I'm not a legal scholar, so you can take this for what it's worth. I think that that's important, but I think being able to point to state statutes, in addition to a history of prohibiting. I don't know which is more persuasive, but I like having both. Let's put it that way. I think both really help our argument, and we've been using those arguments. It was used in Michigan, for example. There's a case in Michigan, Wade versus the University of Michigan. You might be familiar with, but that just was heard, and the plaintiff Wade, who brought a handgun onto campus, he was it was held that the university's prohibition did not violate the Second Amendment, and they used that whole history and tradition test in that Wade case as one of the reasons for upholding the school's policy of prohibiting guns on campus.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. One of the things that I did want to ask was when you are, talking to, so I assume it's mostly students that you talk to and kind of, gauge where they are. What is one of the biggest things that you hear from the students? Mainly because there's something that I want to bring up from our previous speaker that I think has relevance. But I would like to hear what is an argument that you hear a lot when speaking to students.
Uh, I think it's important. Obviously, we talk about stakeholders, and for us, the stakeholders on this issue are students, definitely. They're also faculty, and faculty are kind of a key constituency that we work with. We have over the last, 16 years plus. So those are the two key constituencies. You asked me about students, so I'll respond to, about students. I think that from the students I've talked to and worked with in 25, 27 states, something like that over the years, uh, they'll say things like this is a solution in search of a problem. They don't see why, why. They're concerned more about their safety. And, if someone else is carrying, they don't want to be in a situation where, say, a classroom where someone's carrying, or in more importantly, in a dormitory, in a room. And there are some states where you can have a gun in a dormitory. It's rare, but there are places supposedly you're supposed to have it in a locked box. But I think, the safety of that, the academic environment, being able to speak freely and being concerned, those are some of the issues, that I've heard over the years from students,
Mhm.
why they would not want firearms on campus.
One of the arguments that we got from our last speaker that was for campus carry, he talked about advocating for others and advocating for people who, you know, maybe aren't as big or as tall or as knowledgeable on how to defend themselves. So um he points out a scenario of, the smaller people on campus, the more vulnerable people, kind of is what he hints at. What how do you feel about that argument being that, you know, maybe campus carry isn't for everyone, but
Mhm.
what if it's for those who do need it?
Right. I mean, you definitely hear that, for the personal protection. And I'm going to answer that, but there's been a number of reasons put forth by folks who support guns on campus. The first was, we're going to be able to stop a Virginia Tech style shooting, a mass shooting, which, really hasn't happened. There's we want to arm people to prevent sexual assault. Um, the problem with that is that you're going to be arming the perpetrators in instances. So there's that. There's the argument you just mentioned. And listen, I think personal safety is that's a real issue, and I don't want to kind of push that under the rug. I have two daughters in college, so it's when I started this work, I didn't, well, when I first started this work, I didn't have any kids. That's how old I am. But I've got kids in college, and it's definitely a concern. I think it's a real concern, and I think you have something like the Cleary Act I'm sure you guys are know what the Cleary Act is, and you know where schools have to report, certain types of crimes, every year if they're receiving federal funding. And who knows if all those incidents are actually, are all the incidents on campus actually being reported? I don't know. Uh, but there are incidents. There's incidents of sexual assault. There are incidents of rape. There are incidents of fondling. There's incidents of
Mhm.
burglary and different things. This stuff's happening, for sure. But is the defense for that to arm people, or are there other things we can be doing? Whether it's, better escorting systems? Is it better?
Mhm.
A better police presence? Is it better lighting? Are there things we can be doing short of, okay, you know what, we can't take care of you all. So University X is saying, all right, we're now going to let some people carry on campus for personal protection. I really haven't seen a college that's just gotten to that point and said, you know what, they put their hands up and we can't really protect you, so we're going to let people carry. There are some instances where people can get exceptions. Yes, that definitely happens. There's situations where people are like, if they're hunting, and they're maybe more in a rural area, they can store their firearm with campus police. But I haven't, in our experience, I haven't seen where schools have resorted to that. So I'd like to see other defensive means used that don't include firearms, because there's the unintended consequences too, which, we quickly talk about the gun being stolen, the
Mhm.
gun being left behind, the gun going off unintentionally and injuring someone, which, those things have happened. So I think you have to also think about the incidents that could happen if you're starting to arm people. But I
Mhm.
don't want to discount that. I don't mean to discount uh, that fear, because it's real and incidents do happen.
There was one study that we found that showed a correlation. And I'm not saying correlation is causation, obviously, but it's a newer study and it showed that sexual assault and rape cases had actually increased in a specific campus that had just adopted a policy to allow campus carry.
Yes. Was
So
that was that the study done by Julie Gavrin?
uh, I'm not sure. I know it was done on the University of Tennessee, but
Oh,
let me see if
Tennessee. Oh,
I can find
really? Okay, interesting. That one I'll have to find. So, a staff person who used to work for the campaign for a number of years looked at Utah and Colorado after guns on campus had been passed there, and then saw an increase in what you just mentioned in sexual assault. The and the reason that we wanted to take a look at it, we were curious to see if there had been increases or not, but to see if we could rebut, which is an argument by John Lott, who is, a big proponent of guns everywhere, and saying that when you have more guns, you have less crime. And our point was that you actually saw an increase in crime in these places after, people were allowed to carry versus before. But what we weren't saying was that these crimes were being committed by people who carried concealed firearms. That wasn't the point. Was to kind of rebut this more guns, less crime. If you haven't seen that, I can send that to you. Be happy to do that. But that's probably similar to the Tennessee study, but I'll go look at that because I'm curious to read that.
A state legislative bill here a few years ago, and it was for campus carry. One of the things when I was reading over it, it does mention CCW only. So it does rule out, 18 to 20 and allows for only 21-year-olds and up to have it because you need to be 21 to have a CCW.
Right.
Now, that was from what our previous speaker said. He said it was a pretty moderate pill. Um, but I would kind of like to get your take on that and how you feel about that, considering that, maybe not giving everyone a gun, but giving those who are trained and giving those who are, I guess, a little more educated on what the firearm is. How do you feel about that? And kind of just get your thoughts on that, keeping guns off campus.
I mean, I think that in a number of the states where guns on campus is the law, it is 21 and over. So that's sometimes there's exceptions for people that served in the military. So if they were under 21 and had military service, they could carry. I don't think it makes a I don't think it strengthens our argument. I think that you're still going to have a large, potentially a large population who can carry, and we're not going to know who those folks are. Tennessee is the only state right now where faculty, Tennessee is the only state, if I'm not mistaken, I think I'm correct here, where folks that are carrying on campus have to report to campus law enforcement, and the ones that are carrying legally are faculty in Tennessee right now. So I think that again, we pretty much have a zero tolerance. I'll just be upfront with you. I'm not gonna sugarcoat that. We prefer not to see anyone carrying except for trained law enforcement, people that, are this is what their job is, and not this person is very persistent. Um, Sorry about that.
No worries.
The And I've lost my train. So we have a zero tolerance for folks carrying. There's one of the arguments also I just want to mention, if I could quickly, is that there haven't been any incidents on campuses where guns on campus is permitted, and that's just not true. And we on our website we have a list of, I think, 35 or 36 documented incidents. Uh, we're finishing up a large project right now to kind of expand that, and we've added probably, and it's not on the website yet, but we've added another 40 or 50 incidents in different states where people have been injured, people have been arrested. There have been guns have been left behind, different things that have happened. Have there been homicides and things like that, or there have been some firearm suicides, but there definitely been incidents that have occurred, and that was the thing that we were concerned about happening. What would happen if these laws were enacted? Uh, it's a it's something that we're still looking at, but again, I don't really see a major distinction between the 18 or 19-year-old carrying versus the 21. We'd rather it not be any of them, quite frankly.
Gotcha.
I do want to ask one thing. So in Arizona, we have extra protections for Second Amendment rights. In the Arizona Constitution, Article 2, Section 26, it gives the right of the individual to bear arms in defense of himself or the state shall not be impaired. And I wanted to see, do you think that Arizona having its own specific section giving greater firearm rights to its citizens would impair your ability to push away sort of campus carry legislation?
I think it's a good question, Nick, and I think that I believe there was a case in Texas a while back where somebody um, made the argument that, and this is before that you could carry on campus in Texas, that made the argument that the dorm was their home, and that by extension the home was, they could keep a firearm in their home for protection, under the Second Amendment. So I think that argument will it's going to be made. We're going to see it more frequently, because sometimes you'll hear, well, what's the difference between, if you have a college and you can legally carry the firearm across the street, but then you have this mythical line, and why can't you carry it here? And I would say, for a number of reasons, that the college it's a totally different environment than in other places, with students living in close quarters, with laboratories, with volatile chemicals, and so on and so forth. So um, I think that we will see, and as you mentioned with that in the Arizona Constitution, I could definitely see people making that argument that, well, what's the distinction between me having it on campus and our argument would be that that the colleges have a duty to protect the people that are there, that they should have certain abilities to develop and implement safety protocols. There are a few states like Montana, and I would argue Wyoming and Michigan, that have it in their constitution that the colleges they're created as a kind of a state entity. And so if they're a state entity, they would have the ability regulate certain things, which would include public safety. But I think that it's a long-winded answer, but I agree that I think that argument could be raised. My hope is that it would be defeated. Um, but I think we'll start to see that, more frequently.
On that, the mythical line kind of reasoning that you
Yeah.
used for like why could you carry on one side and one other?
Yeah.
To give a little background to what I wanted to say, I study like constitutional law. A lot of that like con and criminal law area.
Right.
So I do a lot of that stuff. My main focus is on the First Amendment, and I know in the First Amendment, time, place, and manner restrictions are almost always accepted. So we can regulate when or where you can say speech, but we just can't regulate what kind of speech you have. Do you
Right.
think those kind of regulations would kind of emulate what we're doing with the Second Amendment here of like you can carry just not in campuses? This is a
Right.
time, place, and manner restriction, not a right
Yeah.
restriction.
That's fascinating. So in 20 what is this 20 in 2023 we were helping fight a permitless carry bill in Florida. So basically you wouldn't have to have a permit, which is something there's almost 30 states now, and I think Arizona is one of them where you don't have to have a permit. You could get one, but you don't have to have a permit to carry concealed. And so when I was speaking in opposition, I brought up the First Amendment and I said that there are these time and place restrictions. We had to get a permit to hold this rally. We couldn't just show up on the steps. We had to have a permit. It had to be approved, but we wanted to exercise our First Amendment rights. But we had to go through these hoops before we could do this. And I don't see the real distinction here. The Justice you know Scalia in the Heller case, talked about the, schools being kind of places of, where, guns you know, could be regulated and, as well, these safe spaces as well as other places. And I think that, my hope is that, that type of reasoning rationale would be kind of upheld, by other courts, when looking at this issue. I don't, they haven't said that the Second Amendment is an absolute right, I don't believe, but they do make it very difficult. The justices have made it more difficult, I think, to kind of parse out, well, what laws are legal and what laws are, unconstitutional. It's the best I can kind of give you right now.
So one of the things that I didn't want to talk on is, you say you guys have a no tolerance policy. Um, and for the campuses that do have it, how do you think that it affects protests or debates on campus where when you do have the presence of firearms versus not having them, right? Where there is no campus carry. Do you think that there is a kind of an overall effect on the students when they do partake in this that they do know that is one of the risks or things like that?
Are you saying, I'm sorry, I just want to make sure I understand. So, Damien, are you saying like at a school where guns are allowed on campus and there's a protest, are people thinking, hey, there could be the potential for violence here because some people are
Ye-
armed? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, versus those students who protest on campuses where that isn't the case.
Yeah. I've heard that, brought up. I know that in Utah, I don't know if it was the University of Utah, I'm sorry which school it was, but it was one of the public colleges in Utah had had scheduled a speaker and they canceled that speaker because they were concerned about the potential for violence. And I think in Texas there was and I'm again forgetting the school, but I don't want to, it's real anecdotal and I don't know. I wouldn't want to hang my hat on that to say, okay, this is something that, is a real concern for students, in all those schools where guns on campus is allowed.
Mhm.
I will say that when it comes to faculty, I know that faculty has expressed concerns about guns on campus because of the potential chilling effect of, when they're speaking in their classes, they're concerned about grade inflation, they're giving not grade inflation, but when they're giving a grade, if the grade is too low, and there have been a couple of incidents documented where a professor was threatened, having guns being allowed in a faculty office, concern there. Also in disciplinary hearings, and you're starting to see that being teased out now, where if there's disciplinary hearings, I mean, guns are allowed on campus, that they would be prohibited in disciplinary hearings. But in terms of the speech or events, I really haven't seen much except for those two, that I've mentioned, and I don't have the actual schools, so I wish I had more information about that, but I don't.
No, no worries. And this is another kind of a follow-up, what is one of the biggest kind of pieces when you guys present these to the universities and talk to your stakeholders? What is the most important piece that you guys talk about when it comes to this issue? What is the number one thing people should know when you guys are talking to them?
Right. I mean, I think it's a good question. I think that one of the things that we always talk about, and I won't say this is the number one, but I definitely want to get this in because I didn't really mention it before, is that campus crime rates are extremely low. We talked a little bit about this before, that, does crime happen on campus? It definitely does. But when you compare that to what's happening off campus where firearms are permitted, uh, campus crime is extremely low. And the reason we know that is we look at the Clery Act, and we look at, that's all, within the Department of Education, that information can be downloaded, and we'll run that for all the schools in a particular state. So for example, in Arizona, when we were fighting guns, we've been fighting guns on campus, as I mentioned, since 2011. I was there in 2011 when the Governor Brewer vetoed the legislation. And we've been working. This year the bill didn't make it to Governor Hobbs' desk, but I know she vetoed it in the prior year. But you know, campus crime rates are very low, so we talk about that for sure. Um, the other piece that we talk about is that really the risk to students, and the risk of increasing suicide, via firearms if these weapons are present. The Just kind of the potential chilling effect it can have, as I mentioned, on the academic environment. Where a gun's going to be carried. They're going to be in the classroom. They're going to be in the faculty offices. Uh, Also, when it comes to sexual assault, if the firearm is present, there's chances that the increase to you're arming the perpetrators in many cases, and you're also increasing the risk especially for females, in those scenarios where guns are going to be introduced. So those are some of the leading issues that we try to talk about when working with students and faculty.
When we were talking about the Arizona Senate bill and how it specifically went for concealed carry license holders, I think it's one interesting point that I would have liked to make earlier is that, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but the people who hold those CCW licenses usually are not the ones that need them on campus. I think if you take a look at the demographic of people that have CCW licenses, more than likely they're much more prepared and capable of taking care of themselves on campus rather than this bill being out there to protect those who actually need it. So the idea of, oh, someone that could be overpowered or is a minority or could be attacked on campus, those are usually the ones who are holding these CCW licenses. And I think that would make a really big impact in the actual efficacy of, is that the right word? I don't know. But the actual use of this bill.
So let me see if I understand it. So are you saying that the people are you disarming the people then in this sense?
What I'm arguing is the people that a bill like this would be trying to arm
Mhm.
aren't the ones who would actually need to carry on campus,
Oh, interesting.
at
Okay.
least in the argument of trying to protect yourself.
Right, 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 right. Um, well,
I would have to look at the demographics.
yeah, it
So
would
I'm not
be nice
100%
to
certain on that.
Yeah, it would be, I would love to know how many people are actually carrying legally on, where guns on campus is permitted. That's, what we've seen is that we think the numbers are pretty low in terms of the overall student population, but we don't know for sure because no one is forced to, no one is permitted, no one has to register with campus law enforcement. So we just have no idea, how many. If it's, and that's an argument that gets made. Well, if it's 21 and over, uh, there aren't going to be that many people carrying because a lot of the students are 18, 19, 20. But then when you look at community college, and I don't know what the median, but the community colleges tend to have students that are older than the 18, 19. There could be people coming back, into the into higher education as and trying to get their degree and such. So it's hard to say. But again, we really try to bring it back to reducing risk for students and faculty, and we believe that once you're introducing the firearm into the equation, then you've got the potential for the unintentional shooting, the gun being left behind, used in a during a sexual assault, so on and so forth. It's not being used in defensive gun uses. It's just not really happening from what we can see.
And what I kind of want to hit on that. You say that, kind of going and looking at the statistics, you don't really see the gun being used for self-defense, correct?
Um, I know that the folks that take an opposite view on this issue will say that this happens quite frequently, and it may happen. It definitely happens in the general public. There's definitely DGUs, defensive gun uses. I'm not going to say it doesn't happen. I don't think it happens. Uh, they'll quote it's like over 2 million times or something like that. I don't know where those numbers come from. I think it's much less than that. Um, but again, I think that that argument on campus, I just don't think it's one of the stronger arguments to use. I mean, that's the reason why you want to have it. It's more what you're hearing more and more is it's a constitutional right, and that's the reason. And law, or it's a God-given right. And lawmakers will say that they're saying that more and more now that it's a God-given right. And you know, uh, I'm you know I don't believe that that's a strong argument. I think that the Second Amendment you know, never talked about arming people, in that environment, and it actually talked about arming a militia. So, but that's a whole nother thing. We could go into that. So, I'm sorry, I was really digressing, but I do want to say that, in terms of the Second Amendment, it makes the job a little more difficult. But I think
Mhm.
that given what the court has said so far about schools being sensitive places, and that that gives us, I think, some quarter to say, there are areas where, firearms should not be permitted. And then again, when you look at the history and tradition test of where, like you mentioned, Nick, with Jefferson and then some of the state statutes and so on, that there's carve outs and a place for us to say, hey, this is not a place for firearms. And if you talk to presidents, college presidents, most of them, there's probably a few of them, maybe have a different view, and faculty and even students. The polling is all real high for the most part. Even in Wyoming, 64% did not want between faculty and students did not want firearms on the campus. So, I think and there's been some polling in Arizona. It's been a while, but I know there's some really good polls of Arizona students that, said, similar things.
And so then what is one of the kind of, I know you touched on it earlier a little bit, is more in keeping a police presence kind of, or keeping people who are trained to do that. What is one of the things that you think would benefit the students' safety, without trying to, police them, I guess would be.
Right, right. I mean, when I went to college many years ago, there was campus police, and it was farcical. They didn't do anything, and they were not armed. but that had nothing to do with it. They just didn't do anything. I think that I can see students, and I've definitely have had them say this to me, that are concerned about even, police presence, of police carrying firearms, that, this kind of military, the potential for like a military presence that's very, disconcerting to say the least. So, and then I think about in the K through 12 space where there are schools that have school resource officers, police officers that are armed, other people, safety officers, that are don't have the type of law enforcement training that school resource officers have. They're carrying firearms, so that's concerning to me. I think there needs to be a balance. And law, if there's going to be campus law enforcement, I think they've got to have the type of training that is the same as what, city police or, that they have. Otherwise, you'd run the risk of incidents, a lot of incidents happening that just have nothing to do with protecting people. So it's definitely a concern for sure. Uh, it's trending towards more campus police departments being armed versus, arms being taken away from them.
Gotcha. Perfect. I'm all set, Nick.
I think that's good for us.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time, Andy. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no,
If if you have any questions or anything like that, please feel free to reach out to us.
right.
It's been a pleasure to have you on, honestly, and really understand the other side to our argument that we're trying to find, and it was very insightful, very
Well, I
insightful.
appreciate the opportunity to come on. And if you can, I guess I can go on can I go on to Spotify or something and find this podcast, or how do I find it?
So we're gonna upload it
Yeah.
pretty soon here.
Yeah.
Not today, but it should be ready by Monday, and we're gonna put it on YouTube. I'll
Okay.
have Nick send you a link to it
Okay.
to make
Okay.
sure. Yeah,
Cool. All right. Well, have a nice holiday. Thank you for reaching out, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk about the issue.
absolutely. Thank you so much for your time, and
All right.
you have a great day. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Thanks very much. Bye.